Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I welcome you in today's webinar, which is organized by the Center for International Strategic Analysis, ΚΕΔΙΣΑ, and the Embassy of the Republic of Lithuania in Greece. This is the fourth time where we co-organize a webinar with the Embassy of the Republic of Lithuania in Greece, and we are confident that it will be successful as were the previous ones. I would like to cordially thank Her Excellency the Ambassador of the Republic of Lithuania in Greece, Mrs. Linas Kerstonaite, and the Deputy Head of Mission, Mr. Mindaugas Viskupaitis, for their fruitful cooperation. Furthermore, I would like to underline the importance of the topic of today's webinar. Amid the current turbulent geopolitical environment, with the ongoing war in Ukraine and the fragile ceasefire in the Middle East, Lithuania and Greece in the coming year, in 2027, will hold the rotating presidency of the Council of the European Union. The opportunities and the challenges for both countries will be enormous. Our distinguished speakers, Mr. Justinas Mikus and Dr. Ioannis Foukas, will analyze the priorities of the respective presidencies and the challenges and perspectives ahead. I'm confident that the two presidencies will be successful and will boost EU's geopolitical resilience and strategic autonomy. Unfortunately, Her Excellency the Ambassador of the Lithuania in Greece, Mrs. Linas Kerstonaite, due to an unexpected professional commitment, will not be able to address us in person live, but she has sent us a recorded message. So I will kindly ask Mr. Athousakis to play the message of Her Excellency the Ambassador of Lithuania in Greece. Thank you all for your participation, and I wish you to have a nice webinar. Mr. Athousakis, we are waiting for you to play the recorded message of Her Excellency the Ambassador of Lithuania in Greece.
Dear participants, it's a great pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar dedicated to the upcoming presidency of Lithuania and Greece of the Council of the European Union in 2027. We meet at a timely and important moment for Europe. As the European Union continues to navigate an increasingly complex geopolitical landscape, the role of rotating presidencies remains essential in advancing and ensuring continuity, fostering consensus, and our shared priorities. In this context, both Lithuania and Greece carry significant responsibility and opportunity to contribute to shaping to the Union's strategic direction. For Lithuania, the forthcoming presidency is both a privilege and a duty. We approach it with a very clear understanding that leadership in today's European Union requires determination, close cooperation among member states, and unwavering commitment to our fundamental values: democracy, security, and rule of law. These values are not merely declarative. They underpin Europe's credibility and guide our actions both internally and on the global stage. Lithuania and Greece, while located at different edges of Europe, share a strong appreciation of the importance of unity, resilience, and solidarity. Our historical experiences remind us that peace must be actively preserved, that even smaller member states can help shape strategic outcomes, and that the strength of European Union lies in its cohesion. The 2027 presidencies will take place at a time when Europe must continue to respond to evolving security challenges, accelerate its digital and green transitions, and reinforce its global partnerships. Close coordination and mutual understanding between our countries will be essential in ensuring that priorities are addressed effectively and cohesively. Today's discussion offers a valuable opportunity to exchange views on the perspectives and challenges ahead, to reflect on our common goals, and to contribute ideas that can help ensure successful and forward-looking presidencies. Thank you so much, and I wish you a very interesting webinar. Thank you.
We thank Her Excellency the Ambassador of Lithuania in Greece, Mrs. Linas Kerstonaite, for her recorded message, her recorded welcoming speech. Now we can start with our webinar. I will be the moderator of today's webinar. I will have also this capacity. So before giving the floor to Mr. Justinas Mikus from Lithuania, I suppose he's in Vilnius right now. I will shortly read something, a little bit about his bio. And then immediately after that, I will give him the floor. So Mr. Mikus is currently working as a senior policy analyst at the Government Strategic Analysis Center at Vilnius, Lithuania. And he's a graduate of the University of Cambridge. He holds an MPhil in politics and international relations, as well as an AB in politics from Princeton University in the US. He has worked in various think tanks and the European Commission, and he participated in many research projects. So this is a short, let's say, read of his bio. And right now, I will give the floor to Mr. Mikus. I will welcome him officially to our webinar. And we are looking forward for his speech. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Thank you very much for a well-run event. I'm happy to hear that this is shaping up to be a tradition by now, if it's fourth just bilaterally. Yeah, I really welcome the intensifying relations between Greece and Lithuania. I've been to another event hosted by your colleagues, I think, at the Equipe, a little bit before, and I'm happy that both the presidency, but also I think different convergent priorities on issues sometimes that, how to say, maybe put Greece and Lithuania apart, like migration, difference in salience, maybe 10 years ago, now very much salient. In both cases, more convergence, are bringing, the two countries and the relationships closer together. So I hope that the presidency will give another qualitative boost. I also have to say that since submitting the bio for the organizers, actually joined the MFA on a part-time position to advise on economic security issues, and I just wanted to put on record that all of my, statements today are, of course, in strict, independent, and personal or expert capacity, not to represent the government's views. And then lastly, yeah, I took the words perspectives and challenges at the, in the discussion title seriously. I don't want to, present a programmatic speech of Lithuania's priorities, both because on the one hand, officially, they're all, still being determined and formulated, too early to identify, in greater detail. And on the other hand, they're quite intuitive because we live in the EU in 26, we will be holding the presidency in 27. The priorities will be what the world dictates, and it is, I think, for most, if not all countries, a certain combination of security, competitiveness, enlargement, maybe social cohesion, or something else fitting that role. And then, yeah, like the loose directions of the priorities for the priority directions for Lithuania, approved by the parliament in cooperation with the government earlier this year, list exactly these priorities for Lithuania. These are the framing sort of directions. They're not, the program pillars, but they're first of all the EU and Euro-Atlantic space and the security and defense thereof, strengthening those two pillars of, I guess, our security and long-term existence. Second is the competitiveness and the economic resilience, which includes a budget that the next MFF that adequately addresses the needs of the EU in the 21st century is how it's framed. Third is the internal security, preparedness, and democratic resilience, which covers a broad range of issues from migration to collective identity and history. I'm happy to expand on that a little bit, how those connect and all fall under the preparedness banner. The fourth is social security and social cohesion, with a particular emphasis in Lithuania, though widely shared, I think, across, especially Eastern Europe, but across all of EU, demographics and the changing society, both aging society, also the declining total number of the population. So that's the first framing direction for what topics, what the issues, what policy programs we want to highlight. And then the last one is enlargement. And I wonder, you would maybe expect that the enlargement would be higher up in the order, but since these are framing conditions, I think I encourage you to just take them as a broad sweep of things Lithuania will try to care for and try to distinguish itself for during the presidency. But of course, there are many more specific thrust initiatives that you will see. I think geoeconomics, for example, which will definitely be a focus and is a newfound maybe focus for Lithuania, especially heightened by the experience of the Chinese coercion in 2021, will definitely be a priority. It doesn't necessarily neatly fit into any one of those 5 pillars. It combines something from the first of the Euro-Atlantic security space and of the second, competitiveness and resilience, but it transcends them, but it will definitely be a priority. So as I said, they're intuitive, they're understandable, they're not necessarily worth me presenting it. We can discuss each and every one of them during the Q&A, which I'm very much looking forward to. But I did want to go back to the perspectives and the challenges, because these, I think, are maybe at this stage and in this kind of format, a webinar in the evening of enthusiasts and analysts and intellectuals. I think, these are the questions that are worth probing. What kind of maybe goals and expectations we should set for the presidencies, the trio presidencies really, depend really a lot on also the perspective that we cast on what the EU is today and it will be in 27. And there are, I think, at least a few such perspectives that, if you adapt them as a lens, it really changes, I guess, the baseline parameters of how we evaluate a successful and unsuccessful presidency. And the first, for anybody who's been following, not necessarily Lithuanian, but Eastern European, Baltic news, is that for the last couple of weeks, there's been the first perspective is regional security and security urgent threat from Russia, which will not disappear in 27, but which is taking a very interesting form right now. I think for the last 2 years or so, we've heard multiple EU intelligence agencies, as well as the US intelligence analysts, saying that 27 may be the year where Russia may reach preparedness, theoretical capacity to launch another attack against NATO countries. And in the last couple of weeks, you must have heard Volodymyr Zelensky, as well as other Ukrainian top leaders, highlighting that there is a potential, and we've seen some signals that an attack may be imminent. Maybe it will not be too much, maybe it will be provocative, etc. But it's 27 that is, coming to be that date where we're not only to expect theoretical capability, but we are seeing signals of intent. And you saw across the Baltics, as well as in other places in the region, a somewhat of a pushback against this. And this is an interesting dimension. We're talking about the relative urgency of preparing for what may come too early. Nobody's prepared for it. And the necessity to keep a calm and steady pace and face, especially as we, try to, do all the duties and fulfill all the privileges of the presidency. So how this will affect Lithuanian presidency specifically, but also the trio work and the trio coordination, is a very interesting aspect. And it's interesting both at the highest strategic levels, but also very practically, it will be the first presidency probably so close to the Russian border, or maybe the Polish one was also one since the full-scale invasion, but the heightened security for all the ambassadors and ministers and leaders coming here, and the high chance of provocations, high visibility provocations, is not to be disregarded. Strategically, politically, of course, it will raise these questions of how, how an honest broker that every presidency has to be, how that role, how that function can be performed by a country that potentially is facing, an imminent, even if not large-scale attack. So that's the first thing. And I am genuinely, I'm not I don't have access to all these highly classified debates about the veracity and the likelihood of one type of provocation or another. But it is interesting to see that all Baltic states are trying to tone it down now, having been for 3 years saying that, we must be ready for a war tomorrow, and how it will play out is a first perspective. The second perspective is, of course, global. And 27 is not only the year where there were forecasting their attempts that Russia may be, again, at capacity to, reaching the capability to sow chaos with NATO countries. But it's also the date by which we expect the Chinese army and the Chinese state be prepared, again, reach the capability for a provocation in Taiwan. This is partially in the grand tradition of analyzing Soviet and communist regimes. We pick a date, 100 years since the PLA was established, 27, they must be ready. But there are some, evidence to suggest that these are the plans, not to use them, but to reach the capacity. We have already seen a strategic choke point being weaponized. We are all feeling and bracing for its effects. The threats of a second, a provocation in that region in Taiwan, the Taiwan Strait, and even not necessarily Taiwan Strait, the broader Southeast Asian region may be highly disruptive for any of the 3 presidencies that we have coming, or even later. But this will be a huge sword of Damocles, especially because just looking at the calendar of EU's external commitments, high-level summits, etc., Asia will play a huge role in 27 for the EU. We have the 50th anniversary of ASEAN Treaty, we have the APEC Summit and the Indo-Pacific Leaders Summit, all scheduled for either the Lithuanian presidency or the Greek presidency, indeed. So there is a chance for a lot of constructive dialogue with countries that we see as trusted, reliable allies in probably the center of gravity of world politics today, the Indo-Pacific. But there's also a chance that the big historical force that is China nowadays will be ready for disruption and maybe keen to use it, especially if, and this is the second part of the global perspective, the US is no longer chaotic, it's legitimately split after the midterm elections. And what that global picture entails is, it is crucial for setting up the expectations, the hopes for, what the presidency may look like. Of course, the logistical, tactical elements won't change, but the measure against which, we will assess the EU may change dramatically depending on this global development. So this is the regional security perspective. The global politics perspective, obviously I did not even exhaust, 1/3 of all things that can happen globally. And I think a lot of them can be great for the follow-up discussion. But I also want to say the European politics perspective is also very, very important. We all collectively, I hope most of us collectively, sign a big sigh of relief with the departure of Viktor Orban from the EU Council. And hopefully that will make some work at the EU level more productive, faster, easier. But in 27, we will brace for what will definitely be the pivotal election of the next few years, which is the French presidential election, happening squarely during the Lithuanian presidency in April, May. But already fully underway, already as we speak, the campaign is on the way. But we know already for a couple of years how paralyzing the political gridlock and the electoral expectations are for French politics. We must expect that it will be harder for them to make concrete decisions, even if they will be probably making a lot of symbolic, electorally informed positions and decisions in the first half of 27. But we don't know what the results will be, and we don't know how exactly this will affect the EU policymaking, and to what extent other countries, the shareholders and stakeholders of the European project, have to alter their politics and policies to help, fend off probably a disruptive, highly disruptive actor joining the EU. This is not a question I'm suggesting. I'm not suggesting this as an agenda, but it's definitely on the minds of many. I've seen when working in Brussels how people adjust policy for electoral purposes in Brussels for electoral purposes of either a member state or an important partner. Do not initiate this or that policy right now. It will have effects that will negatively affect electoral successes of a party that we want, etc. So these questions will be very interesting and very tricky. They will be extra tricky because we will also have multiple local elections in Germany, which we will all have to watch very carefully and probably with some jittery, given that Merz has so far failed at his domestic agenda, and the success of the, let's say, the important moves to move beyond the German debt brake to re-embrace defense expenditure are not intuitively all celebrated domestically, even if celebrated, I think, globally or at least at a European level. And the regional politics really matter, obviously, to Germany. And any one of those elections can, again, prove a constraint for policy decisions in Berlin, hold up EU-level compromises in policymaking, but also, give a huge mood booster or otherwise constraint for the European project altogether. So we have the regional perspective, which raises a question of how we can do the orderly, honest broker exercise that is the presidency during times of potentially urgent threats. The global perspective, where EU will be moving to the second phase of its policy cycle at the time when maybe tectonic disruptions in global politics will happen. And 2 years in, the Draghi report, etc., most of what we said is great ideas need to be implemented. We will probably not have any room to backpedal. That's something still need calibrating, etc. We'll have to be delivering. And if the global disruptions are so severe as they can be, it will be raising the stakes very high for the EU. And then the EU politics perspective, where we will have the two so far key, or the biggest member states, not necessarily key member states, both having incredibly treacherous politics unfolding. I have the last perspective, which is the EU policy perspective that I briefly announced. We will be moving into the second half of the strategic, agenda of the Council of the Commission, the 24-29 political cycle. We will inevitably have far too many strategies, just given how many have been announced in the last year and a half, to not again have an impression that the EU has overpromised. It is not necessary that it will underdeliver, but it definitely will have promised by the time Lithuania and Greece assumes presidency a lot, because just the inflation of documents and the ambitions of the Commission is notable. And the crucial test there will of course be the multi-annual financial framework, which we see, highly mixed signals today. We saw the Parliament demanding much more than the 2 billion. I was reading the reports, the readouts of the meeting between the Finnish president, Alexander Stubb, one of the thought leaders of the EU, or at least thought of as a thought leader in the EU, saying that it is far too big already, as is the proposal for the budget. So there will be these big and tough discussions about how great our ambitions can be, not in terms of strategy papers, but in terms of finances pledged, and for what purposes. So the difficulty of that policy discussion will definitely not lend an easy hand to the EU addressing either its urgent regional security, its immense global tectonic political challenges, or its member state political electoral challenges. And so I say this not because I fear that our presidencies are doomed for a tough time, and I am conscious that I, how to say, did not pay that much attention to emerging opportunities that are on the horizon for the 27. I think, if we begin symbolically, the 70th anniversary of the Treaty of Rome and the start of the Lisbon process is a good time to again think about grand bargains for Europe that we desperately need. So there are opportunities, there are conditions for opportunities, but I always feel, and this is maybe the Eastern European strategic foresighter talking, it's better to focus minds on challenges. That's when creativity comes on ideas on how to solve them. So this is the perspectives that I wanted to share, responding to the prompt of the discussion. But I'm very happy to go into greater detail. I know that this was a big, airplane view, bird's eye view overview of the whole thing. I'm happy to talk in greater detail about whether the formal Lithuanian priorities or any other issue of the ones that I listed. But I will stop here, having laid the lay of the land.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mikus, for your comprehensive presentation and your interesting points, speaking about the perspectives and the challenges of the forthcoming Lithuanian and Greek presidency in the EU next year. I will now read a short bio of Dr. Ioannis Foukas before giving him the floor for his speech. Dr. Ioannis Foukas is an active officer of the Hellenic Armed Forces since 2003. He has vast experience in issues of EU defense policy. His academic background he holds an MA in governance, development and security of the Mediterranean from the Department of Mediterranean Studies of the University of the Aegean, and he holds a Doctor of Philosophy at the Department of Mediterranean Studies of the University of the Aegean, with his thesis being the Common Defense and Security Policy and its contribution to the perspective of the Western Balkan countries joining the European Union. He has attended numerous academic seminars with certification. I think that now it's the time to give the floor to Dr. Ioannis Foukas. We thank him for his participation in today's webinar, and we're expecting with interest his speech about the Greek presidency, the perspectives and the challenges, and maybe the priorities if they are set. Thank you, Mr. Foukas. The floor is yours.
Dear Mr. Gbanútzos, thank you. I would also like to thank Mr. Mikus for his comprehensive analysis. Really set the set for the discussion to move on. I will continue with the same theme as he noted, that each presidency happens in a context. We cannot avoid any state will hold the EU presidency for 6 months in a specific geopolitical context. So that is also for Lithuania, that is also for Greece. We're missing Ireland. Our priority should be co-written. We should make an 18-month priority list so that we will all facilitate to the endurance of the EU as the 2009 Lisbon Treaty dictates. So we can see, we can look out for each state's priorities before they are officially declared as the 18th month plan. But I would like, before going to the Greece's priorities on its presidency, provide a little bit some details from the past. It will be very short in a nutshell. Also to showcase that we cannot at any point avoid the context. So 1993, it was the pro-enlargement policy of the European Union. 1983, Greece held the presidency and helped to formulate the integrated Mediterranean programs. And we had Spain and Portugal later becoming members of the EU family. In 1988, the big discussions prior to Maastricht, the Treaty of 1992 of Maastricht. 1984, a transitional, less impactful presidency, but 2003, the most impactful presidency of Greece and the European Union. It was two events coming together: the Great Enlargement, in the Southeast Europe, and the war in Iraq. The world was in transition. And 2014, it was during the financial crisis. Greece had to balance between all internal problems and the need to overcome the financial crisis the EU was facing at that time. So now, in 2027, as Mr. Mikus clearly mentioned, and in a very comprehensive way, we are also facing a challenge. And to this challenge, Greece will try to promote its own interests, but also in a wider perspective. To put it shortly, Greece's interests are mainly focused, first of all, to be the host of all negotiations taking place about the annual financial framework. The nature of the MFF, the budget, will really shape the future of the European Union. We are a pro-social policy budget where we have for many years pro-social policy budgets, but maybe it's the time that a major shift in budgeting the EU's economics will happen. This will in fact affect and impact many functions of Greece's statehood. So Greece will be deeply interested not to shake these interests internally by a grave reshape of the annual financial framework of the EU. So this transition will be as smooth as possible. Second, Greece will try to boost its energy transition. Greece's latest agreements with the United States about exploiting energy sources in the Eastern Mediterranean has given gravitas into Greece's position into EU energy architecture, and Greece will try to boost further all that transition in European Union, and that will come to a halt because there is, to my understanding, there's a discussion that yet to be opened. What our relations with Russia will be after the war will end, because the war will end eventually. Are we going to accept energy from Russia, or are we going to be solely dependent from the United States, or partially? That is a big discussion, not yet to be opened, but that may be a matter of discussion, especially as Mr. Mikus pointed that we're going to have a government shift in Germany and France. Also, Greece will be deeply interested to integrate the defense policy of the European Union. The article of the Lisbon Treaty 42.7 really holds on to Greece's interests very well, more than NATO Article 5. And the reason behind it is so obvious that I could tell it openly. It's Turkey, because Turkey is not involved in our Lisbon Treaty Article 42.7. This article can be more enhanced, can be linked with enhanced cooperation in the security and defense, And really, I believe, and to my understanding, is that Greece and Lithuania can really hold on together on that and facilitate honorable discussions as honest brokers to this end. Lastly, Greece, I believe that will try to keep on its Western Balkan policy. Has lost a lot. Since the financial crisis of 2012-15. Has lost most of its impact in the region, and Greece will try to regain most of its influence that has been overtaken by other states and powers. Greece's presidency will be a pivotal, not year, but semester, for reshaping its presence in the Western Balkans, especially in their enlargement perspective. So these perspectives also form some challenges. And to these challenges, I would like to point so that we can continue our discussion further on. So one of the biggest challenges is not to come to a conclusion at the end of Greece's semester regarding the multi-annual financial framework. It will be a calamity. It will be a great disappointment for everyone not to sign the MFF for 2028 to 2034 in the December of 2027, when Greece is about to deliver its presidency. It will be to no one's interest, especially Greece. So close cooperation with Lithuania will hold on to that as a transition of institutional, institutional memory from Lithuania's presidency will be very tremendously helpful to Greece in order to foster all these negotiations. And to my understanding is that all people linked to that, or all the stakeholders into that procedure will be aware of that as we speak. So another also challenge is that if we wish that will never happen, but if an escalation of Russia's aggression happen, also an escalation of hostilities in the Middle East, or a turning point into China's policy in the Southeast Asia will occur, that means that both Lithuania and Greece will have to lead EU's discussion with the rest of the world in a transitional period. 2023, Greece, and it's sad to say, but we have to be honest, didn't really manage to fulfill its potential and its role. When the United States of America wanted to invade Iraq and wanted the European Union to participate as a whole to that invasion, we had a differentiation of opinions and at that time, and it was Greece presidency that had to foster all that differentiation, and some EU countries didn't follow United States into the war in Iraq, some followed, and this split in the European Union really bothered EU defense matters for a long time. So it will be a real challenge to bring all European EU member states together into a common understanding of the geopolitical risks of 2027, because if the worst of the calamities will happen, it will be our responsibility and Lithuania's responsibility to keep us together, because any differentiation or disagreement will keep us behind for many years, as history showed. And administrative capacity is a real deal because in any case, the state holds the presidency. All ministries will have to be together. It's not 2014, it's not 1994. Everything is more complex. EU is not the same. So its ministry has to be really prepared to hold on long meetings, different state perspectives, and different paradigms. Because as Mr. Mikus mentioned, the Orban lost presidency of Hungary, but it's not Orban we are talking about. It's the paradigm of the state towards European Union. It's the state and the above state level, and how integrated we are as Europe. So the perspective and the paradigm of integration in the European Union will be more imminent as a discussion behind all discussions. It will be what we want to say, but we don't really say in the next years. So wanting more Europe or wanting more state will be the real question behind all things discussed. Even now, as we speak, some Greek politicians are being prosecuted for spending illegally EU money, and this has clearly opened a discussion about how the state is supposed to function inside an organization like European Union. And the ultimate question is, do we want more integration or not? Is this the end or not? And 2027 will really mark and will stress that all member states will stress its meaning. So we have more to discuss in our Q&A set. So I would like to close my introduction here, and I'm open to questions. Thank you again, Mr. Banoutsos, for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Foukas, for your presentation. It was very insightful and interesting. Both presentations were. So I think now we can move on to the Q&A session of our this evening's webinar. I would kindly ask the participants if they would like to pose a question, to submit a question on the chat. Please do, and to submit their questions. However, because I see that maybe our participants will like to think over before submitting the question, I would like to submit a question myself. I can see here Mr. Nikos. Mr. Nikos, if you want, please write your question on the chat. Thank you. So my question is about, Mr. Mikus mentioned that, about the recent electoral results in Hungary, that the defeat of Mr. Orban was a relief for most of the EU, and now decisions will be easier to be made without the usual objections of Mr. Orban. However, immediately after the defeat of Mr. Orban in Hungary in the elections, we had a win of a party in Bulgaria, of the ex-president of Bulgaria, which he seems to be more pro-Russian than the previous Bulgarian government. And I wanted to ask both speakers how they see this development in Bulgaria. And of course, we know that there are countries like the Czech Republic under the new government with Mr. Babis and also Slovak Republic, Slovakia of Mr. Fico, and of course the most, let's say, challenging perspective in the coming year is the French elections, as rightly was mentioned by Mr. Mikus. What a possible new president, not Mr. Macron, another president will, what kind of attitude he will have towards the European Union and some major strategic priorities. So this is my first question, and please, the floor is to Mr. Mikus, as we started, if he wants to answer. Thank you.
Unfortunately, I have to acknowledge the limits of my expertise. Bulgaria is not a country I'm deeply familiar with, or, you know, Mr. Radev is not a political figure that I know all too well. But I took one thing away from that election, which is that, you know, it happened, A, in a context of a deep political gridlock, but B, like decades of highest level and lowest level of corruption, which is not a unique story in Bulgaria. I always say that, you know, we have the post-transition countries have, of course, legacies of, you know, some shortcomings in rule of law here and there, more and less. Lithuania is, like today, we have a high-profile bribery scandal happening to do with the previous government. So these things are, you know, appear here and there, but obviously it's not unique to Eastern Europe, to Southeastern Europe. It's a common European problem. It can happen everywhere, and it is especially pernicious if it's associated with the, you know, the sort of pro-European establishment that is where the claims to the right to govern, our competence, our, you know, sort of normalcy, our strategic, like the way the sort of pro-establishment, the mainstream European parties have positioned themselves, allied them with you know, good governance and sort of responsible statecraft, and corruption is especially pernicious for any project that tries to legitimate itself like that. So that's my main, you know, takeaway. I have to say, like, you know, if the citizenry remembers Boyko Borisov well, it's hard to scare them off with Roman Radev. This is maybe a little too pithy, but I do think that this is an important thing. I think that, you know, the Lithuanian reaction was, of course, some concern, but mixed. There is a strong understanding, maybe from first-hand experience, that there is more bark than bite with many pro-Russian, or not even pro-Russian, but anti-systemic politicians in really structurally small and weak EU member states, just because of their dependence on the EU apparatus. And I would say even like Orban's case has always been, you know, much more bark and much more symbolic and thought leadership than actual policy steer, with a few exceptions. One is the negative control, not so much a, you know, shaping the direction of the EU that it would have otherwise not taken, but like withholding, delaying some decisions, and of course amplifying the one issue that has always been highly salient with European publics, but benefited from his entrepreneurship, which is really hardline attitude towards migration. So I think that you know, these things will play out in a way in Bulgaria, but my main takeaway is not so much the specific figure of Radev and what he may bring to the table, but the persistent weakness of the European mainstream elites, because so many of them are dirty. I don't need to repeat what Mr. Ioannis Foucault said just before about the ongoing dramas in Greece, and how closely, you know, the government and some of its associates are tied with the broader perception of like, this is the EU mainstream establishment, and how that can explode if the circumstances align. No, I think about, you know, France and that election. I think an interesting dynamic I want to see there is how, you know, we had the first big wave of the French nationalist alignment after Brexit, which ended the talks of Frexit. And I think we're witnessing now the second wave of French nationalist alignment after Trump has become so toxic in Europe that it has to, it forces them to like acknowledge not only the need for Europe, but like that outflanking maybe how to say, distancing it from the global populist backlash, the global nationalist movement, to a specifically European one, which then retains the need for Europe, is I think the second dynamic that's emerging, and I think maybe more articulated, better articulated with Bardella than with Le Pen. But that's an interesting thing to watch. I think that we will see a lot of arguments for a strong Europe, irrespective of which candidate ultimately wins in the EU, in the French election. I expect a much less constructive attitude by the French on EU budget negotiations, were it to be the right candidate, as in hard right candidate winning, rather than the centrist. But I do think that monetary matters, well, budgetary matters, will be incredibly hard for any politician in France, given how they didn't manage that much, you know, to get that much growth from the 10 years of ultra cheap borrowing, but they inflated their state debt to levels that are that really bear a burden on the political dynamics there. So I don't want to sound that you know, structure trumps over political contingency, but I do think that in both of these cases, the more interesting dynamic for me is not the individual positions of leaders, but these forces that for small states have a certain disciplining effect, and for France, the Trump effect now, you know, forces a certain realignment of the European nationalists. I'll give the floor to Mr. Foucault now.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I agree about France. I believe the structure is stronger than the politician, the ideology in France. I believe this. France is so deeply structured with the idea of the European Union as a founding member state of the European Union, holds many of its interests inside the European Union. And I will use the example of Meloni in Italy, where the narrative before its election was mostly anti-European or pro-state or pro-Trump, pro-Make America Great Again, something like with a lot of similarities regarding Italy, mostly manifested through immigration policy. But after Meloni sat on the government chair, has really reshaped her way of thinking. Is so pro-European, didn't hesitate to confront Trump's policy, or Trump's, let's say, okay, I will restrain myself of using policy when I refer to Trump, but to Trump's narrative about Europe. Really, we have seen Meloni defending Europe. So I believe something similar will happen in France too. Regarding Bulgaria, in order to address your initial question, because we have seen Hungary transitioning and Bulgaria replacing Hungary as pro-Russian member state inside the European Union. It is very difficult for weak states regarding demographics, energy dependency, economy, and regional security matters. All these contribute for a state like Bulgaria, Greece at some point, Romania, not to have the time to fully transition from Southeast European state to a fully EU state. We can see that there are powers holding back the transition inside the society. We have really to address that to understate level in order to understand in a better way all the powers involved, because we can also see the identity matters really hold on to the Balkan Peninsula, and all identity matters really play a major role to all policy implementations. And there's something to be said about Bulgaria. I will, to my understanding, Bulgaria will, whatever happens, cannot really overcome the real leverage that EU and United States can use to this country. And the EU leverage is economy, and the EU leverage is energy. So whatever the narrative might be, whatever the identity obstacles might appear against being pro-European and all things considered, the really strong leverage will always be there for states like Bulgaria, also Greece. I will not try to avoid. We are not like Germany, we are not like Italy. Dependency will give leverage. And in the end, I will use that premise for later on the discussion. Can a state outside of the European Union be as resilient as it is inside the European Union? That's the real question. Resiliency of member states is what states have to take into consideration regarding their place in the wider framework. Okay, can Bulgaria be as resilient as it is outside, as it is now, if it was outside the European Union? That answer can also direct us to understand how things will evolve in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Foukas. Thank you, Mr. Mikos, for your answers to my question. I will move on with a question from Mr. Nikos. I will read it. Mr. Mikos said about the possibility of a new attack of Russia in a NATO country. I think this will mean a third world war. From the other hand, at the past years, Russia, through Belarus, was trying to attack Lithuania with illegal immigrants in the same way that Turkey is doing this to Greece. The difference is that Turkey is a member of NATO and Greece has no policies to stop this. We need a common European army and something more strong, a common educational system that will improve the bonds of Europe. As seems the states under the presidency of Trump are not a reliable ally. So what about the possibility of Russia's accession to the EU? Oh, very provocative question from Mr. Nikos. So I will start again with Mr. Mikos. If you would like to comment on this question, Mr. Nikos.
Yeah, I think it will be a great achievement if we accept at least 2 of the Western Balkan countries by the time Trump is out. So I think there's not, like, Trump will be gone 7 times before Russia is at the stage in terms of its rule of law, socioeconomic conditions, any and all metrics. Even if we discounted the geostrategic alignment or misalignment, just no chance. You know, it's not an economy right now, truly, in any sort of reliable sense. So even on the acquis that are purely technocratic, we would not have a basis for a discussion about the possibility of Russia's accession. So that little part, I will probably just appeal to process and say that this is not worth discussing. Although, of course, there would be other issues, and there's a reason why Turkey is not a member beyond whatever technical alignments or misalignments, and there's very little chance that Russia would be politically acceptable to a good majority, definitely a blocking majority of the EU member states. But there are, interesting things here. Your comments about the common European army and something more strong, a common educational system, I think that strengthen the bonds. These are the debates that were really tough to have in Lithuania 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but they are now becoming more and more serious. And arguably one of the highest profile Lithuanian politicians ever, now a European commissioner, Andrius Kubilius, has come out strongly in favor of the European army. He still has considerable influence, ideationally, with the Conservative Party, which most likely will inherit the government in 28, 29. Some of those ideas may persist. So this is a live discussion, but of course, and I go back to the very first point I made about the level of necessary ambition and the urgency of practical solutions. And I think currently still the Lithuanian position is that a common European army, while theoretically and in the long term, a big valuable achievement, is just too long and too far away, even with all the troubles or uncertainty coming from the US considered, to invest in the short term, at least, if we're discussing presidency priorities and directions. The common educational system, or at least, greater alignment of curricula, greater understanding of each other's history, is, I think, something that's slowly becoming a discussion. Obviously, the educational systems differ so greatly between member states. There is an economic case even beyond the building a demos case for a greater alignment of training, qualifications, etc. And maybe the inevitable AI and technological disruption to our educational systems also loosens up some of the other things that are holding us from greater alignment. But I wanted to highlight here that, Lithuania places great emphasis on sort of cultural education and historical identity formation. And I think that's one of the, softer, let's say, priorities of our presidency program planners, but it's a real one. It's elevating the understanding of the Russian imperialist and Soviet, especially the Soviet crimes against humanity, and is in general the totalitarian regimes, that it is the big story of so much of Eastern Europe after the Second World War, even if it's simultaneously a story of, victory over Nazism and liberation there. Achieving that understanding, that nuanced understanding that, it is arguably true that after the Second World War, with decolonization, with the defeat of Nazism and fascism, there was probably the biggest explosion of liberty and national emancipation, in modern history. That's true, but a significant chunk of our European Union actually entered one of the darkest periods of their history. So there is an emphasis on that. Obviously, here it's not charitable. This is something that hurts a lot of Lithuanian population. It's something that we want to elevate to the European level. But I try to view it as a start of a broader discussion about, like, what is the common narrative beyond, the sort of, a peace project born in 1945, and then, 80s Delors entrepreneurship connects the single market. These are easy stories. They're not full stories of the EU. And so this is a great opportunity not to just accept what Lithuania will offer as a cultural program, as, a reflection of historical memory, but to augment it, to add on it. I don't know, I recently read a book about the Greek War of Independence and the Greek Revolution as like the start of the modern, in many ways, thinking about modernity. And I found it so fascinating, and it's not taught in Lithuania. So I think I would treat it as a fertile ground for deeper discussions. Whether they land into the harmonization of educational systems or not is a different question. I think if there are to be greater alignments of our educational systems, the drivers there will not only be security, identity, and sort of demos, but as I said, as with everything in the EU, economic arguments, technological arguments will also play a role. But there are other ways to build this shared identity, and I think that historical discourse is one option. So if you have the ears of Greek policymakers, they will be discussing with the Lithuanians about what the priorities are. Maybe there's another area to open up for dialogue between Greece and Lithuania in terms of greater recognition of each other's historical narratives and stories, and then forging a new one.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mikos. Mr. Foukas, Dr. Foukas, you want to make a comment on this?
Yes, actually, about the common educational system, it is education is so politicized. I will only refer to this, that regarding the Soviet history of Lithuania, still in Greece there are people that will deny that because of their political ideas. So it's very complex, but it's very fascinating to learn each other's history. And I would like to thank Mr. Mikos from the Borders about reading the Greek Revolution, which is a fascinating story of liberal rights, because the Constitution of Epidavros was, in fact, the third constitution written after the American Revolution, the French Revolution. So there's also political context, understanding each other's history, or learning about the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which is a powerhouse controlling a vast part of Central Europe. Most Greeks, I believe, they don't know that, but we should have known that there is a lot of cultural context, European cultural context attributed to Lithuania. So that will help. We should understand each other, and we'll be able to speak politically more easily. Yes, I will totally agree with that, even if it takes many years from now, even if it takes courage to read and disagree initially, and overcome the initial disagreement and then understand. So please allow me to a small comment about the European Army. European Army is very difficult to be achieved. In order to build the European Army, you have to build headquarters. There are no European headquarters as we speak. Even if we gather all voluntary participants that we wish to fight for Europe in one place, we will not have an HQ, a command and control entity to give them their mission. So we will start talking about European Army by the moment we will institute a European command and control entity. We don't command and control. So what command and control means? Give a mission and be able to coordinate it in time. We cannot do that as Europeans. We are dependent on NATO structures. In order to do that, we have to reshape our way of thinking. We have to invest in that initially, in command and control entities, and then we will start the discussion. And the second is, can we really integrate the European space into a defense space? No. It is extremely difficult for a unit from Greece to go to Lithuania and operate. We don't have the same configurations, we don't have the same weapons, we don't fight the same way. We're We're not standardized, even if we are in NATO, because NATO is so loose on that, because Americans fight, others follow. In order to achieve a European army, standardization must be top priority. We are not at this discussion now. But is this a solution to our problems? Yes. And this is a solution to many geopolitical problems. Not to build an army, but show intent. And to address the last question is, the last part of Nico's question is, what about the possibility of Russia's accession to the European Union? I will elaborate on that, and I will formulate my own question. If Russia was to be part of the European Union, should we be before we make a EU army or after? Mr. Mikos is laughing, but I believe he got the context of my question. Yes, so I have my own answer, but okay. I would like everybody to contemplate on what I just said, or maybe Mikos can really give me feedback. I would like to hear his feedback on that.
Mr. Mikos would like to make a comment on the last question, rhetoric question of Mr. Foukas.
I'm sorry, was it Mr. Mikos, me, or
yes,
Mr. Nikos?
Yes,
the question.
You would like to make a comment on the last remark of Mr. Foukas?
No, I really like the rhetorical question. Yeah, how to, all of our EU, that the only justification for the EU, not the only, but the key justification for an EU army that we hear mostly is the imminent and urgent threat Russia poses currently. How to, now use how would that discussion be possible if Russia were a serious candidate member? It's a very good provocation, and but it's a serious question. Yeah, I think, Mr. Kobylos, my before mentioned defense commissioner, was and is perhaps still a target of a lot of political controversy in Lithuania, because despite having the conservative government, despite being, always staunchly critical of Putin, etc., but he always insisted on the ultimate goal being a democratic, free, and EU-friendly Russia, with which we have a positive, constructive relations. That's not a position that's easy to take for a highly prominent Lithuanian politician, especially after 2022. And he got a lot of criticism from his party members, many of whom are much more comfortable intellectually with this permanent Iron Curtain mentality, just always on the boundary zone. It will not change. His is not that view, and I hope and think there are others who think like him. So in the longer term perspective, yeah, this is the question. But as I said, there are so many, ditches to jump over until that question becomes feasible and practical.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mikos. We have another question from Mrs. Bobulina Nikaki. Is cultural diplomacy a domain that could be used by both states, Greece and Lithuania, in order to achieve their purposes? I suppose she means during the respective presidencies of the EU Council. Mr. Mikos, if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, I think it's, of course, part of, there's tremendous interest and energy put into thinking of the cultural program, how we present ourselves, how it differs from, the 2013. There's been a lot of, I think there's been quite a lot of progress in terms of both establishing and globalizing Lithuania's culture, which, unlike Greece with the world-defining legacy from, the ancient Greece onwards, we had maybe more work to do for us, there was more cut out for us to make people familiar with the Lithuanian cultural heritage. And now I've seen that being a very important part of the discussion, but beyond what I said about the historical identity and historical memory, I think it's not necessarily focused on any one specific goal, but rather to both present the country, invite others, and then just like to be this undergirding sort of basis for all of our activities, rather than any one or another specific priority. So I don't know what to say more beyond the recognition that yes, cultural diplomacy will be a big factor. I see a lot of clever people putting a lot of thought into creating a good program, both in the capitals and in Brussels, and of course for everybody who's visiting Lithuania here. But I don't know to what extent there is a discussion on how specifically will you say that some cultural diplomacy touch points to grease the wheels of any negotiations that you may have. Maybe that's a little bit too Machiavellian for now, at least, but we'll see how that develops.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mikus. Mr. Foukas, would you like to make a comment on the question of Mrs. Mikaki?
Yes. I can only address it politically. I don't have the background to see it from another perspective, but cultural diplomacy really creates long-term political output. It's kind of a soft power, but a really powerful impact in long terms. Both Greece and Lithuania are member states of the European Union, and what we lack, I believe, is we don't have a formulated context that is solid to a Greek or a Lithuanian or French or Italian. What was the cultural involvement of Europe in 20th century, in the early 21st century, as a unique political entity that produces human rights as a cultural phenomenon. That Ian Manners, the Greek academic persona, described that as normative power. Europe was the first normative power, described as such, meaning that it was the only power in the recent human history that was able to create influence through norms. And what are norms really about? Norms are perceived and accepted values. So I believe we can still work on that. We can see how our national heritage, national history can be linked to that common context. And I believe that both Greece and Lithuania can really share a lot on that. That discussion is meaningful, even if it's overlooked because due to the fact that greater geopolitical matters of greater of gravity and more urgency happen. But yes, I do believe that cultural diplomacy in this political context, to understand our common heritage as Europeans, really matters.
If I may
that
add
was,
one
yeah, please, Mr. Mikus.
Yeah, I very much like that idea of like, what is the cultural story of the 90s, 2000s when the EU has been arguably on the peak? I think the key challenge will be on how to, so much of the story of the EU, especially specifically the EU as in the post-Maastricht creation, it rests on that idea of a world that is relatively stable. I don't like that whole end of history idea, but it is tied to it. So it is like, what world do we build after we stop fighting is maybe the story of the EU of the 90s, 2000s. and the shift is now happening to the like, what is the world we want to fight for, or to defend maybe, and that is a less optimistic. It is a little bit more reactive. How to say framing. It smacks a little bit of Margarita Shina's European way of life, which was quite a defensive portfolio when you looked into the details of what was under the label. But I think it's a real question. And I think there's so much that you can express specifically through culture about the good life that Lithuania has aspired for and achieved in many ways, I think, over the last 20 years with the help of Europe, but that the EU writ large exemplifies, and that the EU sometimes failed to do in Greece's case, I think, during the financial crisis and the way that was handled. But either way, there are some ideals about what a good life is, and that good life is, I think, in my generation, is incredibly attractive. Not necessarily in even like the sort of Nordic welfare state ideal that was maybe 2010s vogue, but more generally, like the sort of right priorities. Now there's a massive trend of the so-called China maxing online, and everybody's sharing all the new gadgets and all the new like sort of super high-tech solutions that the Chinese have developed in their cities that create a good life. They have softer asphalt so that the tires make less noise. That's a wonderful invention. I think there's also definitely a potential for Euromaxing. And if you're clever with cultural diplomacy, especially the social media age cultural diplomacy, you can make Europe very attractive, not as a place that's sort of outside of history and just like, we will now get to shape the world, but as a place that's kind of maybe fragile, but we're defending for it and is legitimately attractive. So I think that I very much agree with that. We need a cultural story for like a very contemporary EU, not only the cultural story that we're familiar with Europe, as a long millennia-long project. But that short-term history cannot rely only on the 90s, 2000s achievements. We also need to adapt it to the 21st century reality.
And if I may continue from
please,
from your last point, because you mentioned China and artificial intelligence really is such a challenge. The norms that we are going to use in order to control the use of artificial intelligence in everyday life or state function, or even if it's used like a decision-making during wartime, is really a matter of culture. Is the European culture at what level will allow artificial intelligence to make decisions about human life? And this is so cultural, and it's so contemporary, and it's so now it is it's happening. So that's why I really reaffirm what Mr. Miku said. Just wanted to argument on his point with that. Yes.
Thank you both. Literally, we have another half an hour of Q&A. So till the time that the next attendant, one of our friends, would like to submit a question, I will again try to ask our two distinguished speakers. First question is about the, I would say, in a provocative maybe way, what is the challenge for both presidencies of the EU of President Trump's factor and his foreign policy in general? So I will start with this, and then I will get back to my second question in mind.
Should we again go in the same order?
Yes, please, Mr. Miku.
Yeah, so Lithuania will not change in the short term, definitely not before or during the presidency. Its long-term commitment to the strategic partnership with the US, which is in many ways a strategic dependence on the US, but increasingly also a partnership. We invest a lot in the US. The US has started investing much more in Lithuania in recent years. So it has expanded beyond just like the US provides the big, broad, security shield to Eastern Europe and Lithuania specifically, to quite a robust, positive bilateral agenda, and especially since, of course, we completely phased out Russian energy imports, the importance of US LNG has increased, and it doubly so now with trying to seek ways to show our commitment to not only the US but specifically to Mr. Trump and his agenda. So that will not change, and it will inevitably create tensions with some of the rest of our EU member states, because I think they rightly recognize that while we remain structurally dependent on the US in security, also in some technology cooperation, all of those come with constraints, and we need to play at least the game on two levels, work constructively with the US where we must, but also try to limit or sometimes reduce, eradicate some of these potentially risky dependencies. Lithuania will be extremely cautious on that, and so you can apply this to many issues, whether there will still be a slate of digital regulations that will be sensitive to the US and big tech companies that Lithuania will of course proceed with as a reliable negotiations coordinator during the presidency, but of course will stay cautious. The issue that Mr. Fukas mentioned before about a very real question about whether we will not in the future as Europe need Russian energy to diversify from US energy dependence is a valid question, but of course will be very tricky for the Lithuanians to consider. Lithuania has announced formally, not formally, but in the current negotiations with Ireland, with Greece on presidency trio priorities, it has made a point that a constructive application of the US-EU trade deal is a priority for as far as the EU trade agenda goes for the presidency. And I think nobody should disagree with the constructive implementation being a priority, but it differs widely what a constructive application means in Spain versus Lithuania. So yeah, it will be a sore issue, but I think that Europe has learned how to work with Trump, and it's not a new dynamic. It's not an unprecedented dynamic, I think, in many ways. In 2003, with no knowledge of what's to come in the next 20 years of the transatlantic relation, we already had the same perceptions of the differences between Eastern Europeans and their attitudes to religiously inclined hard right administration, as was then described, that George W. Bush led, and then the rest of Europe. So none of these issues are new, and they're usually approached pragmatically. But in terms of what can be specifically expected from Mr. Trump in 2007, that's what disruptions can lie therein. That's too difficult to say, just because of we're only in the fifth month of, not even in the fifth month of 26, and I don't think that many of the developments we have now were on the bingos. I will say just one thing, that we saw the effect that the political paralysis at home had for the entrepreneurship of Mr. Macron on the global stage. He became, I think, he was always very active on the global and European stage. Arguably, he became more so when he literally had nothing much to do domestically. I think that Mr. Trump, against many odds and against his own political positioning and the instincts of his base and the expectations that he'd be an isolationist president, has already proven to be an incredibly foreign policy and globalist-minded president. And if the polls are right and there will be a backlash on Trump's policies during the midterm season, and there is a greater constraint on domestic agenda, which there was not much to begin with behind the tax break, we will see a very active Mr. Trump and a very active executive, especially on foreign policy. So I expect the supply of potential disruptions to increase, and dilemmas accordingly. But again, as I said, I think we'll rely on a lot of old scripts that both Lithuania has and all the other EU member states have to coordinate the shared European position. And ultimately, a lot will hinge on the French and the German positionings vis-a-vis the US. So we also have to take it with a certain sense of humility, what our specific role will be, or what our influence will be, what our role will be, can analyze.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mikus, for your answer. Mr. Foukas.
This is a tricky question. We'll have to wait intermediate elections, of course. Everybody will wait, even the United States themselves will wait their elections. I believe that we, as Europe, we had never talked with one administration only. There are a lot of levels of talking with the United States. There's the deep state. There is so much institutional output in the United States that all shape policies and perspectives, and each time administrations, as they change, they forward some policies, but there is a core, and I believe that core in the US policy thinking has changed regardless of Trump. And I believe that core change in the United States thinking about Europe is what Europe really is. They don't see us anymore as an economical entity. They cannot really guarantee our security. They can, maybe they can, but they will be unwilling to do. So they will after Trump's administration will end, that will start more openly. But I believe in the last 2 years of Trump's administration that it will happen more overtly. That the United States will formulate a discussion about the regional security. So 2027 will be the initial year of discussing the regional security of Europe, Eurasia, and Middle East. So last days operations in Mali, where Russia has left from Mali, defeated, is part of this big overview of the new regional architecture. So France is really a pioneer on that, has seen more clearly that this transition, this period we are now experiencing is a transitional period from globalization to partial regionalization. So regions will emerge along with globalization. Globalization will not go away. We will operate globally, but we will function regionally. And to this end, security now will come forward. Few countries are important in that. Countries that are on the borderline when security architecture is now reconsidered are more important. Greece and Lithuania now have greater importance because they are border countries. They exist in the borders of what we call European region. And I believe Trump doesn't understand that, but the core American policy making is really preparing themselves to come to this discussion with the best way they can. But we're going to have 2 years of Trump. Trump, I believe, will measure the cost of its policies in the intermediate elections. Intermediate elections will be a real lesson for him and his way of policy making. He will understand the cost because he will understand losing of favor, losing of preference, losing of acceptance. And that will, if it happens, if he loses in the immediate elections, will make him more thoughtful. He will deliver part of his authorities to the deep state. And I believe that will be the 2 years Europe can really work on with the United States with a lot of subjects that really are either left behind or malfunctioning. And 2027 will be the initial year for that after the intermediate elections. Do I predict the outcome of the intermediate elections by saying that? Somehow, yes. I predict that most of the Americans are now suffering from the increase in the gas, and whoever has been in the United States knows that they don't have any public means of transport. So increasing gas price really hurts more than here in Europe. So yes, I believe that there will be a cost. If not, we're going to delay that discussion that I have just described before for 2 more years and suffer the inconsistency of not having a strategy. And what is strategy about? Strategy is linked to an end state. First, you understand how the world functions to your interests, and then you create a strategy to address that. Strategy is the most optimal way to address the desired end state of the world you can influence. Simple as that. We don't know what is Trump's end state. That's why we cannot really understand its strategy. Inconsistency really makes a fuss, and this we don't have the luxury. Greece doesn't have the luxury. I believe Lithuania doesn't have the luxury to formulate strategy with no understanding of the United States end state, desired end state. Because we in this world we try to converge interests. We identify interests and we try to correlate with other states' interests. Simple as that. I don't know, Andreas, it was a tricky question, so my answer was more tricky.
Very
And
much.
forgive me for that, but yeah.
I think both answers were interesting regarding my question. Maybe, okay, we have another question from Mrs. Marsilda Dnini, but I cannot really understand what she really means. What perspectives are the Lithuania and Greece for challenge in 2027? What is the future for the two countries? Can you please, Mrs. Dnini, clarify a little bit your question, because I don't know if the speakers really understand what you want to ask. Please clarify. You mean about the EU presidency of Lithuania and Greece, or generally about the future of our respective countries? Till the time you will be able to clarify this, I would like to submit another question, to pose another question, which partially it was answered, but I will put it in a more provocative manner. So I would ask, especially Mr. Mikus for Lithuania, but also this question is for Mr. Foukas and for Greece too. So how you feel more comfortable that which article, the 42.7 article of the European Union, of the Lisbon Treaty, for Article 5 of NATO is a guarantee for both countries in the case of attack from a third country. With which article you feel more comfortable that it will be applied in practice in case of a conflict? Because now both articles are theoretical, I would say. So the commitment, I would say, in case of Article 5 of the US, now under Trump administration, are not very certain, are uncertain. And how about the Article 42.7 of EVU, of the EU? Thank you.
I may begin, but Mr. Foukas actually brought it up first, so maybe he wants to expand on his point.
Yes. For Greece, things are pretty simple. If anything happens with Turkey, Article 42.7 is the sole option because Turkey is a NATO member. But in order to answer that question, we have really to take Turkey out of the equation, because what we have in Turkey is really cannot really apply in any other member state. So there is a huge difference between Article 42.7 and NATO Article 5. The difference is institutional framework behind it. Article 42.7 is part of a treaty that really regulates almost any other policy of member states. It's not an article of a defense agreement. It's not an article of a defense treaty. It's an article of a treaty that really regulates how Europe functions. So this is linked to the wider and the more comprehensive relationship European states have to each other. Member states, that they have economic relationships, they have social relationships. We share liberties of movement, of expression. We share liberties of working to other member states, freedom of traveling. All that create a whole different environment of the article to be invoked. Also, there's another article, 222, that France has, during the 2015 terrorist attacks, France chose to put into procedure the article in the European Council, the Article 222, and asked help and support from other member states. And all member states aided to France support in order to defend itself from terrorist attacks. So, and the Article 42.7 is also linked now, as we speak, with funding. The EDF, and alongside with PESCO programs, alongside with the new multi-annual financial framework, which will probably include some budget for defense infrastructure or dual-use infrastructure, will create a new environment, a new defensive environment for each European member state. So if we should, what I'm trying to say, that if a member state chooses from now on, now the discussion is open, now all the initiatives are now on the table and running, EDF, PESCO, Project Athena, then went to European Facility Fund for the Ukraine. There are all things now on the table. If a state chooses to provoke Article 5 of NATO, this is a political statement. This is a political statement to all other European states. we shall understand the gravitas. So it means that they choose United States as a protector, and they don't find Europe ready enough, or they will not really find Europe never ready to defend them or deter any aggression against them. So what happened to Cyprus lately was a declaration. Was a declaration against, not against, was a declaration to the upcoming future of European defense integration. It showcased in the most prominent way that whoever is considered and whoever really can and has the capacity, capability, and political willingness to participate, Article 42.7 can really work. And Cyprus commented on that article. So I would close my comment on that I believe that time is mature now, that each member state has to make a decision, and we cannot really talk as theoretically or academically about it. We are talking politically about it. We have overpassed the academic discussion about the importance of the article as initiated in the Treaty of Lisbon, and now it's merely political. Not merely, but it is political as it can be. And to my understanding, if you don't want to miss the whole, you should stick to Article 42.7, because there's a lot of bunch of behind it, as I described it in the beginning.
Thank you, Mr. Foukas.
Yes.
Mikos, if you would like to make a comment on that.
Yeah. So, of course, it's a slightly different perspective for Lithuania, above all because of the importance attached to the US support that comes with NATO Article 5, but also because of the absence of the particular circumstances that you and Cyprus has regarding Turkey. But I will say this, I don't think there is, even if it's publicly acknowledged or repeated, there is no longer the understanding that the Article number 5 is a ironclad, automatic, and how do you say, secure and sustainable guarantee that is to last forever. I think the shift has happened over time, before, even before Mr. Trump became president the second time. And the shift has taken place to Article 5 will be activated if the state is seen as defensible. And first of all, if it can defend itself. And there's this understanding that the feasibility of that commitment to security is now dependent on national level and maybe regional or bilateral, whatever other level of security arrangements you can make to make the case for the big decision makers to calculate that it's in their interests to actually make the promise real. So I think this is a tremendous shift in terms of a political discourse and the strategic discourse in Lithuania. So the unquestioned, dogma, let's say, of Article 5 is, I think, no longer such. There is some destabilization. It's not disruptive or destructive. It just means that we have to plan accordingly. We have to invest much more in our own national capabilities. We have to prove that the Article 5 is, a fiction that is worth making a reality. It has also loosened the discussion on the 42.7, the TFEU, not, shifting our minds that maybe 42.7, because it's embedded so deeply in the whole, in the treaty for the functioning of the EU, and so the European project is somehow automatically more reliable. But because, if we're now trying to diversify means of our security, we should look into it. But the discussion here is, of course, is always constrained by politics and by the signaling of whether any perceived diversification away from NATO frameworks, commitments, rhetoric may mean to, first of all, Washington, but more broadly to non-EU European allies or allies of Lithuania. And so I think that the current argument or the discourse about 42.7 is twofold. One is that it's promising it needs to be operationalized. So we support, the report of Salninisto, among others, about we need to flesh out war game stress test different ways 42.7 could be used, what would happen, what kind of capabilities we need to be brought in, decision-making formats, etc. So Lithuania, I think, is constructively supportive of that process. And then the second thing is trying to sort of steer the current thinking about 42.7 and the applications thereof into sort of threats and contingencies that are short of a conventional, well, not conventional, but sort of outright military war in a traditional sense, but more hybrid attacks, attacks, diversions on critical infrastructure, and so on and so forth. And I think there are two reasons for that. One is to make sure that there's still this, unassailable supremacy of Article 5 as the top highest level security commitment that we have in the Euro-Atlantic space. But second, because there is a real recognition that the value add of the EU in these domains, critical infrastructure, hybrid attacks, etc., may actually be greater than NATO, which just does not have the full policy toolkit that you would need to protect critical infrastructure, invest in it, as well as, of course, react to any threats. Same with the toolbox necessary for hybrid attacks, etc. So it also wants to sort of focus on areas where the EU is positively contributing, and where a practical agenda can be, in the short term, devised. And I think that's because the Lithuanian Balancing Act is exactly of that nature, is like make sure that NATO is still something that we, keep alive, even if we are increasingly a little worried about it, and also practically strengthen the EU so that it is over the long term ready. I think that's the discourse, and I think that the discourse is reflected in the official positions. How it will evolve past, for example, the initial wargaming scenarios for 42.7, I'm not yet sure whether we'll see a more outright political acceptance or maybe not acceptance of that as a feasible thing. I think in the long term, there's still hope that there will be good times for NATO again, and but we'll also have the stronger 42.7 that serves distinct goals that NATO may not cover as adequately. So I think that's the Lithuanian position / thinking / discourse.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mikus. I think we have time for a last question, and Mrs. Ndini kind of clarified her initial question. So she wants to ask, what are the perspectives for Lithuania and Greece generally in 2027, I suppose? I believe within the framework of the European Union. How they see maybe how the presidency of the European Union will boost also the status of these countries inside the EU, if their presidencies will be successful. So this is a small add for myself, if I can interpret well Mr. Ndini's question.
I can begin maybe. Lithuania definitely has a narrative that this is only our second presidency, so each one still matters quite a lot, and also quite a lot has happened since our last in 2013, namely a massive economic transformation, so much growth, like very perceptibly, we're becoming, at least in Vilnius, Vilnius is 115% of EU average. The rest of the country is not so, but Vilnius, 600,000 in a country of 2.8 million, you still see quite a lot of prosperity now that you could not see. But also politically, of course, the Russian full-scale invasion has heightened or affirmed some of the complaints, some of the fears / warnings that Lithuania has. It has drawn attention to this region, etc. There are many ways in which Lithuania sees itself more both as a successful country, but also as closer to the core of the EU political agenda. And so it wants to have the second presidency to be more than the first. The first was the final test in us becoming a full EU member state. You know, we're a good European member state. We will deliver on the agenda. We'll maybe have one or two concrete victories, but overall, just like to show that we are capable. And that by now, it's more that you know, we have something to give, and we should. And because we've received a lot, we should give back. So that's the narrative, and I think it, you know, it relates to the broader question that Marcilda asked about the way we think about our future. I think I've been struck by the high level of optimism Lithuania has as a society currently. It differs a little bit by age, and unlike Western Europe, where older people tend to be happier and younger people tend to be less happy, in Eastern Europe and in Lithuania especially, it's reverse. Older people are generally less optimistic, more pessimistic, but young people are quite enthusiastic about their future. There are obvious reasons for why in their lived experience, but that narrative still holds, and I think that you know, what we hope to achieve during the presidency, beyond proving that we're no longer just, you know, adequate members, but also constructive and, you know, positively contributing, is to then, you know, use that to give much more exposure to our booming unicorns and our biotech sector, etc., and to our culture and to, you know, our foreign policy ideas. So there is that optimism that this is one of the many ways, admittedly, but a very important way to present what has been achieved and what holds in store for Lithuania. So there's quite a lot of optimism. I do think that, you know, as with every public sentiment, it may shift. But at least as of now, our presidency hopes and dreams are being articulated in that kind of mode, let's say, and with that kind of key.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mikus. Mr. Foukas, would you like to?
Yes, a small comment, but I think that I will address what the question is really about. Is that not about, I believe the question wants to address what Greece is hoping in general, you know, what is the strategy of Greece, what wants Greece to achieve by completing a successful semester. To my understanding, Greece now views itself as being in a threshold of either repairing the damage of the crisis, or overcoming the repairment of the crisis and going to a further development that will level the status of Greece. So that is something that 10 years after the financial crisis and social crisis, because Greece's crisis was multi-level, multi-domain. It was not only the financial, there was also a crisis and reshaping of values. There was a huge migration of people living, and 10 years after that event that was deeply impactful in Greece's society and politics, I believe that Greece views itself on that threshold. And that semester of presidency really will be a pivotal, either will be a pivotal point, or it will showcase that Greece limits is that, and will continue being at that level and experiencing the same circles of economy, the circular economy of going down and up, and etc. it's a game changer. Either Greece will change its level, because on the Eastern Mediterranean, Greece strategy now, with so much investment and the security defense, showcases that it wants to play a more major role, especially regarding all that energy found in deep water. Yes, that's how I see now Greece understanding itself in the event of its upcoming presidency. But I would also like to make a final comment, because Greece and Lithuania are countries that really have the same perception of global issues and how global matters really shape and impact our societies. I believe that both Lithuania and Greece will find themselves to be more able to cooperate by themselves than with larger states inside Europe, like another Visegrad. Because there was a period in time where Poland, Hungary, Croatia, and Romania could really formulate an ad hoc alliance inside the European Union. I believe that states like Greece and Lithuania that are on the verge of change can really formulate an ad hoc cooperation in the future for the benefit both of Greece and Lithuania and both of European Union. That's my understanding of how we will evolve in the next years inside the European Union. Thank you very much, Mr. Banoutsos, for giving me the chance to express that final comment too.
Thank you very much, Mr. Foukas. However,
yes,
maybe I would give a chance to another one of our participants, because I think he poses an interesting question,
of course.
which I didn't really know. Maybe Mr. Mikus knows better than me for sure. It says that it can be observed increased activity of Turkish interests in the Baltics to enter economic defense, also natural resources development cooperation. There any response strategy from Lithuania and from Greece to address Turkish presence in the Baltics in line to EU interests? I think I find this an interesting question. And maybe with this question, we can close our webinar this evening.
Yeah, I mean,
Mr. Mikus, yes.
Yes.
Mr. Mikus, please, if you can,
Very good.
it's very dark, your background. I don't know.
Yeah. Give me 1 second.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I knew there would be sun until 9, but
Okay.
this is God reminding us that we're over time. Yeah, if I can answer, I mean, Lithuania has always tried to pursue sort of positive sum relations with Turkey. And I think just insofar as there is increased attention in that types of goods, namely defense industrial components, technologies, etc., writ large in Lithuania, because of significant expansion of our defense budget, etc., it creates opportunities for countries that are strong in defense and military, and arguably Turkey is one of them. So I think that's probably the main reason. I have not otherwise seen myself, though I don't follow the file too closely, increase of general business delegations from Turkey or so on. There's always been interest, and maybe if we're thinking the EU has made some overtures to revisiting the EU-Turkey deal, maybe that's what is related to it, but I cannot really comment on the question's premise that there's increased activity, in the last year or two across all these different cooperation domains. I would say that yes, the significant expansion of both political and economic interest in building out the defense industrial ecosystem attracts a lot of countries that are not geographically close or maybe normatively close, but are nevertheless leading in some technologies, drones, for example. So I would explain it like that. And I don't know if there's a shared Lithuania-Greece or a shared EU strategy on the Turkey in the Baltics. But as I said, now there's some diplomatic spat between the EU leadership and Erdogan, but generally over the last couple of months, there's been, again, signaling of a renewed energy to the constructive relation. And I think any discussions that Lithuania may have will be going under the auspices of a larger EU framework rather than strictly bilateral.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mikus. Mr. Foukas, you have some knowledge or comment about
Turkey in the Baltics?
The Turkish, let's say, activity in the Baltics and cooperation with Baltic states.
I'm not so familiar with.
You're familiar with that, I don't know. It's the first
in the Balkans, yes, Turkey has a strong presence in the Balkans, strong presence in Germany, but in the Baltics, I'm not very familiar. Energy-wise, not. Military-wise, I don't know if drone technology, but I believe the latest events in the Ukraine war has showcased that Ukraine now is a pioneer in drone technology, so it has overpassed Turkey in that domain. Turkey in that equation about Baltics is like, as Greece, we want to present Turkey as Russia. It was in diplomatic bureaus. It has been always the case after Russian aggression. Now we will bring our Baltic friends to our terms to show them that so many years of aggression, how it really means, and because it was very difficult for Greek diplomacy to bring to terms most of its counterparts. But Russian aggression has given a really good point. So Turkey in the Baltics has come from Greece as a counterpart of aggression and hostility. Otherwise, I cannot really understand. To my understanding, Turkey is now overtaken by what's going on in the Middle East. Cannot really escape from that. Middle East is reshaped. We have Pax Judaica as a new term, the peace that Israel has brought, in quotes, peace. And Turkey cannot escape that. So I cannot really see more of that. I just commented. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Foukas. I think we have already surpassed the programmed term of our webinar, which was 2 hours till 9 p.m.
It was fruitful. It was very fruitful, so it was necessary.
Yes, it's true. It's true. So now we are reaching the end of our today's evening's webinar. I would like to cordially thank Mr. Mikus from Vilnius for his participation, for his very interesting presentation and very insightful statements during the Q&A session, as well as Dr. Foukas for his presentation, his comments during the Q&A session. I would again like to thank the Lithuanian Embassy in Greece for their kind cooperation and for being able to have a successful cooperation in these past years. We have already, this was the fourth webinar we organized together. I would like to thank especially Her Excellency Mrs. Linas Kestonaite, the ambassador of Lithuania and Greece, and the deputy head of mission, Mr. Mindaugas Viskupaitis, for their cooperation and for making this webinar possible today. I would like also to thank, of course, our dear friends, participants, and attendants of today's webinar. For those of whom are interested to receive a certificate of attendance, please send an email as our announcement writes to info@kedisa.gr, and we will provide them with the certificate of attendance in the coming days. This webinar is being recorded, as you already know, and soon, in the coming days, it will be uploaded in our YouTube channel. So thank you very much, everyone, for their participation, especially our distinguished speakers. And I wish you to have a nice evening, everybody. Thank you very much for being with us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you all for participating. Happy to getting the pleasure to know you, Mr. Mikos, and always a pleasure to meet you again in the future. I will be at your disposal if anything is necessary.
Likewise, yeah. I hope there will be more opportunities for exchange with the presidency upcoming. So
yes, likewise. Of course. Have a great evening in Vilnius.
Thank you very much. Likewise.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mikos. Have a nice evening in Vilnius.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Mr. Gbanúτσος. Thank you for this opportunity.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.